China and Russia are two countries known to strongly oppose Western democratic values. Their state authorities are not shy and exert an extraordinary amount of power that's seen as quite frightening for us in the West. So you may think I'm crazy for saying that both Xi Jinping and Putin use and love cryptocurrencies. But that's actually the case, and I'll prove it to you by showing you several official documents and research papers. The geopolitical chessboard is way more complex than a simple dichotomy between state versus decentralization, as most people usually believe. What these leaders enforce in their own countries is something entirely different from the strategy they use against their enemies and competitors. To understand that, let's take a look at Russia. Sometimes they are strongly opposed to cryptocurrencies, warning citizens with a fair amount of fear-mongering. But then, in other circumstances, they seem to absolutely accept cryptocurrencies. Is that a simple contradiction? Let's take a look at some examples. Here's a headline of Russia Today, a television network that's known to have strong ties to Kremlin. Don't buy crypto. Russian central bank warns against investing in volatile digital currencies, citing risk of enormous losses. Back in 2021, Elvira Nabiullina, chair of the country's central bank, said the following in an interview: "Losing in the foreign exchange market is much easier than it is to make money. The most dangerous of all strategies, of course, is speculative crypto assets. The prices are very volatile and losses can be enormous. The central bank never gives advice on what to invest in, but this is definitely not the place." It's true that cryptocurrencies are very volatile, but isn't there some fear-mongering by saying this? Ironically, Russia Today also hosts people like Max Keiser, known to be a strong evangelist of Bitcoin. So, you see some contradictions here? Now let's take a more recent and extreme example when Russia was talking about a complete ban on cryptocurrencies. The Russian central bank argued that the status of the Russian ruble, which is not a reserve currency, does not allow Russia to take a soft approach or ignore the growing risks. In the view of officials, additional measures are advisable. The regulator proposed a tranche of restrictions that it said it would minimize the threats associated with the spread of cryptocurrencies, including banning transactions from the Russian market, prohibiting digital denominations from being used, and preventing financial institutions from investing in them. According to two anonymous sources, and that's quite relevant, the security agency recommended a complete shutdown of crypto operations in Russia in accordance with the recommendations the bank later published. But then something really weird happened. Putin himself stepped in to stop the outright ban on crypto. He said the following during a government meeting: "We also have certain competitive advantages here, especially in so-called mining. I mean, the surplus of electricity and well-trained personnel available in the country. And to be honest, it makes sense. Russia has a number of regions that have a surplus of electricity due to abundant supply from hydroelectric plants or because energy-intensive Soviet-era industrial facilities were shut down." Even weirder was the recent statement from the financial minister arguing that placing a ban on crypto in Russia is the same as banning the internet, which is impossible. First of all, while for most in the West, this story seems completely reasonable, if you study the history of contemporary Russia, well, it's not so common to see contradictions like this between public officials. I mean, it would be easier for Putin to simply talk behind closed doors with these central bank officials. Do they have agendas that are so different like that? I don't think so. I'm more prone to believe that this disagreement happened on purpose. Russians are the most talented in the art of public persuasion. But okay, you may think it's a stretch, so let's talk about some other really important facts. Do you know what hybrid warfare is? It's a strategy that combines military and non-military means such as cyber attacks, propaganda, or political pressure to achieve geopolitical goals. Nowadays, that's how most countries fight each other, and they're all somehow using these kinds of more indirect or unconventional methods. Using cryptocurrencies is one of these methods. Here's an example of that. Country A is fighting against Country B. They both have nuclear arsenals and thus some form of mutual assured destruction. If Country A presses the red button, Country B also presses the button and they both are destroyed. So instead of using soldiers and missiles, Country A starts sending money to protesters, dissidents, and NGOs that strongly oppose the ruling political elite of Country B. You just give them money, training, and even sometimes weapons to overthrow the actual people that are threatening Country A. After kicking out that political elite, you could also just get new leaders that are 100% aligned with you. When you think about it, it's so much easier, and you usually don't even need to kill anyone. It's a little bit more humane, but it's still a war, and you get to achieve your geopolitical goals. Can you now see how cryptocurrencies are so important for both Russia and China? Well, how do you pay these protesters, dissidents, and NGOs? Yeah, cryptocurrencies are great for that, and they have been using it for some time already. Here's an article talking about that. They say the following. Mirotvorets, a controversial independent Ukrainian website that claims to track persons threatening Ukraine's security, has called on the authorities in Kiev to investigate Russia's alleged use of cryptocurrencies via the WEX digital currency exchange platform to fund subversive activities potentially in support of one of the candidates in Ukraine's presidential runoff election. The second person of interest is the alleged beneficiary owner of the WEX crypto exchange, Kavashenko, aka Martyshakov. The apparent motivation behind Kachenko's investment was to use cryptocurrencies to fund the separatist regimes in each of Moscow's unrecognized proxy states across the former Soviet Union, i.e. the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic, Transnistria, as well as the Georgian territories of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. I'm sorry if I pronounced it all wrongly. Indeed, the de facto authorities of Crimea, Kharkiv, Donbas, and Transnistria have themselves publicly expressed interest in using cryptocurrencies to circumvent international sanctions on their financial transactions. They end the article with a very interesting conclusion. This paradoxical pattern of Russia using crypto and blockchain technology to achieve state goals and objectives while simultaneously attempting to restrictively regulate its expansion at home is likely to persist for the foreseeable future. Russian central bank representatives even speculated 2 years ago that they might consider shutting down all domestic crypto exchanges and restrict access to online foreign domiciled exchanges. Russia's use of cryptocurrencies to finance warfare and subversion, as the aforementioned Ukrainian cases show, will require a response based on an integrated intelligence approach combining technology and human efforts. For Kiev, close coordination with allies and partners will thus remain essential in its efforts to counter and deter Moscow. And what about China? They banned all cryptos, right? Well, that's true, but as I discussed in this video about energy, they had to do that because of a very serious energy crisis that could temporarily destroy their country. They're now looking back at crypto with, let's say, less hostility. NFTs, which of course could be used for the same purpose, don't seem to be hated by the Chinese authorities. And even cryptocurrencies themselves are now being reintroduced in certain trial zones. It really isn't a surprise. As this Washington Times article notes, China's hybrid warfare in the crypto space sees victory in sight. China includes cryptocurrency in its strategy to gain global dominance. But why is this a good or a bad thing for you? What concerns me is the fact that if Russia and China are using cryptocurrencies to somehow stop or even affect Western interests, why wouldn't Western countries eventually ban or at least strongly regulate them, especially in a situation of war, as with the recent conflicts in Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Taiwan? The US would absolutely try to stop Russia and China from sending money to their assets. Also, take a look at what's happening in Canada and what they're doing against normal people that donated money to truckers. Here's what another research paper analyzes. Unfortunately, federal laws have not been updated to deal with specific cutting-edge technologies such as blockchain, thereby making it difficult to track and respond to not only domestic threats but international ones as well, such as hybrid threats emanating from China and Russia. And they conclude with a very daring note. In closing, it is worth noting that the dual-use application of blockchain for both military and civilian uses not only make it attractive for employment in hybrid warfare, but also make it that much more potent as a cyber weapon. As a result, action by Congress and the international community is needed to secure both economic and national security from unregulated, risky, or malevolent utilization of blockchain. Adapting to this reality will be increasingly difficult for the West, and its ability to rapidly field mechanisms that can respond and uphold civic and social values linked to freedom and transparency. If the past is any guide, laws and treaties will need to be developed to prevent or at least mitigate future spirals of blockchain-enabled hybrid warfare in the 21st century. As such, believable and actionable enforcement mechanisms to deter violations of cyber warfare through blockchain will be needed. This, of course, will only be possible if the United States and her allies gain a comparative advantage in blockchain technology relative to the adversarial revisionist states of Russia and China. And I'm not here to argue that this is what the United States and Europe should do. Rather, I know I can't affect one of these policies, and I'm here to present you, average citizen as I am, with all this valuable information such that you're able to understand, monitor, and assess what you should do with your actions, time, and money. There's a final possibility that I left for the end of this video precisely because it could be really good for crypto investors. Here's the thing, Russia and China are probably not the only countries using cryptocurrencies to fund their assets. Rather, I would say that at least some Western nations themselves could also be doing the same thing. And I'm not accusing, just speculating, please don't censor me. And if that's the case, then unless all these geopolitical conflicts cease to exist, there will always be a need for digital currencies that bring enough anonymity for countries to pay their spies without actually burning them. We're talking about government agencies, sometimes even armed forces that end up using some cryptocurrencies for very sensitive purposes. Not any cryptocurrency, of course, only those currencies that are concerned about anonymity. I would say maybe Monero, even Bitcoin if well used, could be, hypothetically speaking, one of these coins to be used. But if you think I'm wrong, please let me know. As I always say, I don't have all the answers. I'm just trying to share valuable information with all of you that could help you understand the world and act wisely in your life. If you think that's good enough, feel free to subscribe